The ballroom feels smaller when your own brother turns a microphone into a weapon. Laughter ripples through the crowd as Brian leans into the mic, tuxedo jacket open, cheeks flushed from the open bar. He points at me on the stage and says, "Before my little sister talks about her spreadsheets, let's remember where the real money comes from. Sales pays the bills here." Some people laugh, some stare at the floor, and I can feel my face burning while my parents smile like this is some cute family bit we rehearsed. Then he adds, "It's cute she's getting a title, but we all know she's more comfortable in the back office." Don't worry, sis, big boy deals are still my department. A few tables chuckle, my dad calls out, "Brian's always been the leader," and my promotion speech dies in my throat before it ever starts. What Brian doesn't know, as he soaks up the spotlight, is that I'm about to take over the system that decides his bonuses, and that this little performance is going to cost him tens of thousands of dollars. But to explain how we got to the night my brother publicly humiliated me and I quietly rewired his paycheck, I need to start at the beginning. Hey everyone, my name's Lauren, and this is the story of how my golden boy older brother tried to sabotage my promotion and ended up getting his own bonus slashed instead. Here, you'll hear real-style stories about family favoritism, workplace power plays, and the kind of quiet revenge that doesn't break the law, but absolutely changes the game. If you've ever been the responsible one while a sibling soaked up all the praise, this one might feel a little too familiar. If this story resonates with you, I'd really appreciate your support, a like, a comment, or just joining this community for more stories like this helps more than you know. And if you've ever had a family member embarrass you at work or mess with your career, share it in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you how the spreadsheet sister became the person who quietly cut her brother's bonus from 32 grand down to 10. My name is Lauren Mitchell, I'm 31 years old, and I work as a senior financial analyst for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Chicago. I make about $88,000 a year, and after a lot of late nights with spreadsheets and meal-prepped pasta, I finally bought a condo in Lakeview, around $450,000 with a mortgage that still makes my eye twitch when I look at it. I'm single by choice, no kids, and my idea of a wild Friday night is color-coding pivot tables with a glass of red wine and a true crime podcast in the background. At work, people call me the spreadsheet whisperer because I can look at a messy report and see the story it's telling in about 5 minutes. I'm quiet in big groups, but when it comes to money and policies, I'm meticulous, stubborn, and annoyingly fair. That last part, being fair, is what got me promoted, and it's also what made my brother absolutely furious. My brother is Brian Mitchell, 4 years older than me, and the unofficial prince of our family. He's a regional sales manager for the same company, and between salary and commissions he pulls in around $170,000 a year when he hits his numbers. He lives out in the suburbs in a house that's worth around $820,000, the kind of place with a 3-car garage, a manicured lawn, and a deck he mostly uses for Instagram photos. Our parents helped him with the down payment because sales is such a volatile field, and he needs a good base for clients, as my mom likes to say. Brian's charismatic, loud, and always knows the waiter's name within 2 minutes of sitting down. He can talk his way into and out of almost anything. He drives a shiny SUV, tips big when people are watching, and somehow always manages to redirect every conversation toward his latest, huge deal. Growing up, the family loved to talk about how he was born to be a leader. They called me the responsible one, which is just a polite way of saying, the person we dump all the boring work on. When I was 8 and Brian was 12, our birthdays fell within a couple of weeks of each other. For his, my parents rented out an entire bowling alley lane, ordered matching shirts, and invited what felt like half his middle school. There were balloons, trophies, and a cake with a plastic football player on top, even though he wasn't particularly good at football. For mine, we had 3 girls over for a sleepover in the living room because we're a little tired after all the party planning we did for your brother. I remember my mom saying, "You like quiet things anyway, sweetie. This is more your style," while I helped slice my own cake on paper plates. In high school, when Brian graduated, my parents rented out a private room at a restaurant. There were speeches, a slideshow, and my dad raised his glass and said, "To Brian, the future CEO of something huge." When I graduated a few years later with honors in finance, we had relatives over for sheet cake in the kitchen. My aunt hugged me and said, "You're so smart. You're going to make some man very lucky someday," which pretty much summed up how my accomplishments were framed in that house. Years later, one winter, my mom had surgery that required a couple of nights in the hospital and a pretty strict recovery plan. I was the one on the phone with her insurance, printing out leave forms for my dad and making a spreadsheet of her medications and doses taped to the fridge. Brian showed up one afternoon with a giant bouquet of flowers, posted a selfie with her on social media, and wrote, "Family first," in the caption. Then he left early because he had a client event he couldn't miss. That night, while I helped my dad set alarms for my mom's meds, my parents went on and on about how thoughtful Brian was to bring flowers. My dad said, "He's such a good son. People just gravitate to him," while I was literally holding the pill organizer in my hands. Those patterns didn't stop when we grew up, they just got more expensive. Brian got the big house and the family pride, and I got quietly relied on to keep things from falling apart in the background. A few years back, I joined the same manufacturing company where Brian already worked in sales. He thought it was hilarious. At a family dinner soon after, he clinked his glass and said, "Guess who followed me into the big leagues? Lauren's working at my company now. She'll be keeping my expense reports in line." Everyone laughed, and my mom said, "You two are going to be such a power duo, like we were a marketing campaign." In reality, we worked in totally different departments, but the overlap was enough that our worlds touched. His commissions, my reports, the company's money tying us together. I kept my head down and focused on closing the month, managing budgets, and making sure formulas actually added up. Meanwhile, Brian sent company-wide emails celebrating every big account he landed, always CCing our parents on his personal email so they could see the big wins. One afternoon, a little while before the company holiday party, my boss pulled me into a conference room with glass walls and a view of the city. He closed the door and said, "Lauren, we're promoting you to finance manager after the holidays. You'll oversee compensation reviews, including discretionary bonuses." My heart did this weird mix of leap and panic. More responsibility, more money, and critically, more say in how bonus structures worked. He added, "This isn't public yet, but senior leadership's thrilled with your work. The CFO wants to announce it at the holiday party." I walked back to my desk trying to keep the stupid grin off my face. I didn't tell my family right away. I wanted it to be a surprise and, honestly, I wanted one moment that was mine, just for a little while. But companies are leaky. A few days later, during a meeting where sales and finance were going over quarterly numbers, Brian leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loudly enough for half the room to hear, "So I hear my little sister's moving up in the world. Gonna be in charge of our bonuses, huh?" Heads turned. My ears burned. I managed a tight smile and said, "Nothing's official yet, even though it already was." Brian laughed and said, "Don't get emotional on us, Lauren. We just need someone to make sure the calculators still work." There it was, the first little jab that hinted at how threatened he really felt. After work that day, my phone buzzed in the family group chat. My mom had written, "Brian told us the big news. We're so proud of both our kids working together. Brian leading sales and you supporting him in finance. What a team." The wording stabbed a little. Him leading, me supporting. Brian followed up with a screenshot of a sales leaderboard with his name at the top and wrote, "Don't worry, sis, I'll try not to make your job too hard when my bonus numbers get crazy." My dad replied with a row of flexed arm emojis and "That's my boy," followed by, "And we're proud of you too, Lauren," like an afterthought. I typed and erased 3 different replies before settling on "Thanks." The truth was, I could already feel the power shift coming, and so could Brian. Then the holiday party arrived. It was one of those big downtown hotel ballroom events, with white tablecloths, a DJ playing throwback pop songs, and an open bar that had people way too brave with their dance moves. The company had invited partners and families, so my parents were there, dressed up and buzzing with energy. At some point in the night, the CFO got up on stage to start the awards portion. Tonight, she said, we're excited to recognize some outstanding contributions and announce a key promotion in our finance department. My heart hammered in my chest. Then she called my name. I walked up to the stage, trying not to trip in my heels. She put a hand on my shoulder and said into the mic, "Lauren has been instrumental in tightening our reporting, catching errors, and improving transparency. We're thrilled to promote her to finance manager." There was polite applause, and I took the microphone, ready to say something simple, thank my team, acknowledge leadership, maybe throw in a joke about loving spreadsheets too much. Before I could speak, Brian shot up from his table and jogged toward the stage like this was some comedy club open mic. Hold on, he said, grinning as he gently took the mic from my hand. People laughed, assuming this was cute sibling banter. Before my little sister talks about her spreadsheets, he said, let's remember where the real money comes from. Sales pays the bills here. Some coworkers laughed, but it was that uncomfortable, looking around to see how others laugh. Brian kept going. It's cute she's getting a title, but we all know she's more comfortable in the back office. Don't worry, sis, big boy deals are still my department. My parents, sitting near the front, laughed loudly. My dad called out, Brian's always been the leader, like he was delivering a punchline I'd heard my entire life. I felt my chest tighten, my hands go numb around the folded note of the speech I never got to give. The CFO's smile went stiff. My boss looked furious but frozen, like he didn't know if stepping in would make it worse. Brian finally handed the mic back to me with a wink. I managed to choke out a short, shaky thank you and got off the stage as fast as I could. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and stared at the glitter of my dress, feeling like I'd just been shoved back into the role of little sister in front of the entire company. In that moment, I felt crushed, but that wasn't even the worst part. A few days after the party, on a Tuesday morning, I got an email from my boss with a short message, "Thought you should see this." Attached was an email thread from Brian to our VP of Sales and CC'd to the CFO. Brian had written, "I'm concerned about the appearance of nepotism in promoting my sister into a role that touches incentive structures impacting my pay. She's always been emotional about our dynamic, and I'm worried about potential bias or punitive treatment." Below that, there were screenshots of a chat where he bragged to another sales manager, "Killed her little moment on stage, LOL. Gotta remind everyone who brings the money in." My stomach dropped, and then something in me hardened. It wasn't just the humiliation anymore. This was an attempt to block my promotion and paint me as unstable, all to protect his own wallet. I stared at the screen and thought, very clearly enough. You want to make this about money and bias, Brian? Fine. Let's talk about money. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with my boss and HR. In the invite notes, I wrote, "Follow up on recent promotion and concerns raised by family member employed in sales." When we sat down in the small HR conference room, I laid it all out, the childhood dynamic, the onstage humiliation, and now the email accusing the company of nepotism while also suggesting I might weaponize my job against him. "I want to be very clear," I said. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for protection to do my job fairly, because right now he's trying to undermine my credibility before I even start." HR listened, took notes, and asked for any documentation I had. That was the moment my brain fully shifted from hurt little sister to finance manager who knows exactly where the numbers live and how to pull them. Over the next 10 days or so, I quietly documented everything. First, I collected the party evidence. Videos colleagues had posted on our internal social feed, clips where you could clearly hear Brian's "big boy deals" comment and my dad's "Brian's always been the leader" line. A couple of coworkers, including one from HR who'd been there off the clock, emailed me their phone videos without me asking, with notes like, "This was out of line. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Then I pulled the email and chat screenshots Brian had sent to leadership, highlighting the parts where he called me too emotional and claimed I might punish him. HR already had those. And then, because he decided to turn this into a question of fairness and incentives, I started looking at his numbers, but not as his sister, as the soon-to-be finance manager reviewing commission structures. I requested detailed commission reports for his region, which wasn't suspicious because finance routinely audits sales data, especially around year-end bonuses. I didn't change anything, I just looked. That's when I noticed something interesting. On a few deals, the close dates had been pushed by a day or two into a new period, conveniently nudging his quarterly numbers over certain thresholds that triggered higher commission multipliers. In a couple of cases, the CRM showed the opportunity had originally been attributed to a team member, but the final record listed Brian as the primary owner. Company policy allowed for shared credit in some cases, but not the way this was logged. There were notes from other reps like, Brian will handle the final call, and then, suddenly, 100% of the commission booked under him. I didn't jump to conclusions. I printed the reports, highlighted the questionable entries, and cross-checked them against our commission policy. On one particularly large deal, the timing tweak and changed ownership meant thousands of extra dollars in his pocket. There it was, the smoking gun. While accusing me of potential bias, Brian had been quietly gaming the system that determined his bonus. I scheduled another meeting, this time with HR, my boss, and someone from the legal department. When we sat down, I slid the packet across the table. These are just facts, I said. Date changes, ownership changes, and how they affected his commission tiers. I would be flagging this for any sales manager, relative or not. Legal flipped through the pages, their eyes narrowing. This could be considered manipulation of company records if it wasn't properly authorized, they said. HR added, and combined with the email accusing the company of nepotism, this looks like someone trying to preemptively discredit oversight. I sat there, calm. Inside, my heart was pounding, but I kept my voice level. I'm not asking you to punish him because he's my brother, I said. I'm asking you to treat him exactly like any other employee who did this. I also want a clear boundary that any decisions directly impacting his compensation go through an additional reviewer, so there's no question of bias. Legal nodded. HR said they would open a formal investigation into the commission inconsistencies and his conduct at the party. They also temporarily froze his upcoming year-end bonus payout, around $32,000, pending the review. Over the following days, I kept my distance. At work, I was professional and polite. At home, I ignored the family group chat where Brian sent pictures of himself closing out the year strong with clients. HR and legal quietly interviewed other reps, pulled CRM logs, and cross-checked deals that had been reassigned to Brian. I stayed out of the process except when they needed me to clarify a policy or a formula, and even then, I made sure someone else was in the room. Finally, HR sent me a calendar invite, internal review, sales commission, and conduct. The attendees list made my chest tighten for a second. Brian, HR manager, corporate counsel, the VP of sales, my boss, and me. The meeting was set for a morning just a few days before Christmas, in one of those glass-walled conference rooms that made everything feel exposed. I didn't gloat. I didn't warn my parents. I just prepared my spreadsheets, rehearsed my talking points, and reminded myself that I wasn't doing this as a little sister getting back at a lifetime of favoritism. I was doing it as a finance professional whose integrity had been challenged by someone breaking the rules. The morning of the meeting, the office was quieter than usual, with a lot of people already mentally checked out for the holidays. I walked into the conference room with my laptop and a thin folder. Through the glass, I could see Brian strolling down the hallway, coffee in hand, expression relaxed. He walked in and gave me a half smile. "What's this about?" he asked, settling into a chair like he was about to run a team huddle. The HR manager started. "Thanks for coming, everyone. We're here to discuss some concerns related to recent conduct at the holiday event and to review certain commission records for compliance with company policy." Brian's smile twitched. "Holiday event," he repeated. That was just some harmless fun. HR connected a laptop to the screen on the wall. A video played, the ballroom, the stage, the CFO, and then Brian pushing forward to grab the mic from my hand. We listened to his jokes about little sister and big boy deals, my dad's, Brian's always been the leader line echoing through the speakers. In the video, you could see my face freeze into an awkward smile, then fall as I stepped back. You could also see the CFO's expression change and my boss's jaw clench. When the clip ended, the room was silent for a beat. HR broke it. We received multiple complaints from employees who felt this was unprofessional and created a hostile environment for Lauren during what should have been a straightforward recognition of her promotion. Brian shifted in his seat. It was a joke, he said. Everyone knows we're siblings. They expect a little ribbing. Legal slid a printed email across the table. And this? They asked. Brian glanced down and recognized his own words, the email accusing the company of nepotism and calling me too emotional to oversee his incentives fairly. His tone changed slightly. I was just flagging a potential conflict of interest, he said. I mean, if things got weird between us, it could look bad, right? The VP of sales, who had been quiet so far, finally spoke. Brian, conflict of interest procedures go through HR, not through emails that undermine the credibility of a colleague who just got promoted, especially when that colleague is your sister. Then it was my turn. I connected my laptop and pulled up a clean, color-coded spreadsheet. These are selected deals from your region over the past couple of quarters, I said calmly. I've highlighted entries where the close date or primary owner changed shortly before commission calculations were locked. Each of these modifications pushed your totals over a tier threshold, increasing your payout. On the screen, each row told a quiet story. Original close date, new close date, original owner, new owner, old total, new total, difference in commission. There were notes pulled from the CRM, like Rep A handled the initial relationship, Brian to join closing call, and then a final field, owner, Brian. Legal pointed to one of the larger deals. Walk us through this one, they said. I kept my voice even. This opportunity was logged under a team member for months. 2 days before the quarter ended, the close date was moved and ownership was changed to Brian. That shift pushed his quarterly total a few $1,000s above the threshold that triggered a higher commission multiplier, resulting in several $1,000s of additional pay. Brian lifted his hands, palms out. That was all agreed on internally, he said. I stepped in to close. I'm the regional manager. That's part of my job. The VP of sales frowned. Stepping in to help close is one thing, they said. Reassigning full ownership and changing close dates without proper documentation is another, especially when it directly affects your bonus. Legal pulled out a copy of the company's commission and incentive policy, already tabbed. They read aloud the section that stated, any changes to close dates or deal ownership impacting commission tiers must be approved in writing by senior leadership and documented with clear justification. We've reviewed the records, Legal said. We have not found adequate written approvals for these specific changes, nor documentation that supports full reassignment of credit in several highlighted cases. Brian's face went a little pale. He looked between the VP, HR, and me. So what, you're saying I'm some kind of criminal because I helped my team close deals? He snapped. No one said criminal, Legal replied evenly. But this is a clear violation of internal policy around incentive integrity. When combined with your attempt to preemptively discredit a finance manager overseeing compensation, who also happens to be your sister, it raises serious concerns. The HR manager took a breath. Here's the decision, they said. Based on the investigation, your upcoming year-end bonus will be reduced from $32,000 to $10,000. The remainder will be forfeited due to documented policy breaches in commission handling. Brian stared at them. 10, he repeated, like he'd misheard. The VP continued. In addition, you will be removed from the discretionary bonus pool for the next cycle. Any future changes to deal ownership or close dates in your region will require pre-approval and dual sign-off from finance and sales leadership. HR added, to avoid any actual or perceived conflict of interest, Lauren will not be the sole approver of any item directly tied to your compensation. Those decisions will be escalated and reviewed by an independent committee that includes HR and legal. In other words, I wasn't going to personally flip any switch that hit his paycheck, but I had helped build the system that now limited his ability to game it. Brian finally turned to me, eyes hard. You did this, he said quietly. I held his gaze. You did this, I replied. I just made sure the math told the truth. The room went silent again. This time, no one rushed in to make a joke. Word of the investigation didn't spread in detail. HR is careful, but whispers always travel. People knew Brian's bonus had taken a big hit, and they knew it had something to do with commissions and the holiday party incident everyone saw. At first, he tried to spin it. He told a few people that finance cracked down on everyone and that the company was being extra conservative this year. But sales reps talk, and when others confirmed their bonuses hadn't been slashed like his, the narrative shifted. I stayed out of it. I focused on my new role, building fairer incentive models, improving transparency, and making sure the rules were the same for everyone, including my brother. $10,000 is still a lot of money, but when you're used to $32,000, the difference hits hard, especially when your lifestyle is built around the bigger number. Suddenly, Brian's constant posts about new gadgets and weekend trips slowed down. A few months later, my mom mentioned in passing that he was having to tighten the belt a little because some home renovation he'd planned was on hold. At work, he dialed the charm down a bit. He was still talkative, still loud in meetings, but there was a new stiffness whenever compensation or policy came up. The VP started looping in another manager on some of his larger accounts, citing a need for more collaborative coverage. Within his team, some reps seemed relieved. I overheard one quietly say, "At least now if I bring in a deal, I know the credit won't magically migrate." Brian wasn't demoted, but the message was clear. His days of quietly tweaking the system were over, and leadership was watching. At home, the narrative shifted in slow, awkward inches. My parents didn't know all the details. HR confidentiality saw to that, but they knew Brian's bonus had been cut and that it had something to do with an internal review. One evening at my parents' house, my dad sighed over dinner and said, "This company's being really hard on your brother lately. Sales is under so much pressure." I set my fork down and, for once, didn't stay quiet. "Companies are under pressure, to be fair," I said. "Bonuses are a privilege, not a birthright. They're based on rules, not personality." My mom changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable. Brian barely looked at me during that meal. Over time, the dynamic at family gatherings shifted just a little. When I mentioned something about my work, people actually listened instead of waiting for Brian to jump in with a bigger story. My aunt asked me for advice on her 401k, and my dad started checking with me before making bigger financial decisions. It wasn't some magical, movie-style transformation where everyone suddenly saw me differently, but the ground moved. At work, my promotion stuck. I got a raise, a small team, and a seat at the table when compensation strategies were discussed. I pushed for clearer documentation, simpler policies, and a culture where no one could quietly nudge numbers over a line just because they were charismatic. I upgraded a few things in my own life too. I didn't buy a mansion or a luxury car. I increased my emergency fund, paid extra on my mortgage, and finally decorated my condo in a way that made it feel like mine instead of a place I just crashed between closing books. More importantly, I drew boundaries. If Brian tried to make a joke at my expense in front of family, I shut it down with a simple, "That's not funny to me," and then changed the subject. I stopped laughing along to keep the peace. The next company holiday party rolled around. Same ballroom, same DJ, same open bar. This time, when the CFO called me up, Brian stayed in his seat. I gave a short, confident speech about teamwork and integrity, and no one grabbed the microphone out of my hand. As I walked off the stage, I caught Brian's eye across the room. He looked away first. I didn't feel triumphant in a cartoon villain way. I felt balanced. For the first time, the numbers and the narrative finally lined up. So that's my story. How a lifetime of being the quiet, responsible spreadsheet sister ended with me helping enforce the rules that cut my brother's bonus when he tried to sabotage my promotion. Sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming, fighting, or burning bridges. It's calmly shining a light on the truth and letting the systems people thought they could game actually do their job. If this story made you feel a little less alone in dealing with golden child siblings or workplace sabotage, I'd really appreciate your support. Even a simple like or comment helps this kind of content reach more people who need to hear it. Have you ever had a family member disrespect you at work or mess with your money, and did you ever get any kind of justice in the end? Share your experience in the comments. Stories like yours are exactly why this community exists. And if you're in a similar situation right now, remember this. Document everything, learn the rules better than the people abusing them, and, when you can, get professional advice. You're not powerless, even if your family has spent your whole life treating you like you are.